Hello there and welcome to the English Riviera Film Festival show. And on the show today we have Tim, Jason and Phil, otherwise known as Baobab Productions. They're an independent, award-winning film and theatre company, but before we speak to the guys, here's a few clips from some of their films. So we're here with Baobab Theatre and Film Company, and we're here with Tim, Philip and Jason. Thanks so much for joining us. And we're going to chat about how you got started, what you're about, and some of your amazing festival successes so far. So before we start, if you'd like to introduce yourself, we've never done 3 people in an interview before. It's always been just the 2. So but if you can say a short bit of what inspired you to get into filmmaking, and I'm going to start with Tim, I think.
It was all my idea, and I take all the credit for everything we've ever done. How do we start? We started off with.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know why I'm here. Why? I don't, sorry, I'm going now.
We had. Originally, Phil asked me to do a reading of a thing at a literary festival. Then it became a bit of theatre. We got Jason involved, and during that process, we clearly established a sort of desperate codependency, and decided we had to express it further and fill our empty lives with creative, frantic activity, basically. For my mental health, yeah. And they've been great carers, and I can't say I've been happier, and I'm struggling a bit for this distance. Love these guys. Love them. Just.
I know a therapist if you need one.
That's right, Phil, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, who are you throwing to next, John?
Phil. Yeah, you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it was all my idea. Well, just in terms of approaching film, I spent a lot of time with theatre. That's what I trained in. So, and really originally when we came together, as Tim had said, we were kind of concentrating on putting some theatre together. So the film work actually happened sort of as a happy accident in many respects. But what I would say is obviously working with Jason and Tim, the skill sets, the thing that I'm most proud of kind of being involved in is getting the 3 of us together in that sense and just enabling, like I say, these various skill sets to come together. And so we were trying out theatre, and we were in rehearsal spaces, and we went through basically all of the different styles and techniques of theatre in about 3 days, I think, just to get us to kind of work together, and just kind of the lunacy of that. You can see some of that on our website. I think our blog's still up there. You can see some recordings of us doing some very very theatre-y type things set to music. But the film stuff then kind of came because we were just like, we were in the middle of a play that we were putting together, which is based loosely on this actually. And we still haven't finished that yet, but what we ended up doing then was creating 2 short films, and we're halfway through our first feature when the virus struck. So yeah, theatre sort of just transitioned into film, and it's been a really, as a playwright, it's been a really exciting process to then see how that kind of works as a screenwriter, in the kind of collective way that we put things together. Yeah.
And Jason, who's got a lovely plate of food there that I'm.
Yeah, I know. I don't. This is just an inconvenient meeting. I want to eat. I don't really know what to add to any of that. I mean, it's pretty much as they've described. Myself and Phil don't come from a film background. I mean, Tim does work in some respects with his work. So we were coming at this from a piece of theatre. But the thing about creating a piece of theatre is it's so massively time consuming, and we were kind of chalking out ideas, developing bits and pieces, but it was taking forever for us to really get anything substantial off the ground. And the piece that the piece that Phil mentioned earlier, which is based on the Odyssey, which is a production of Midlife that we were working on. And I think you might have watched some bits that we were developing. We've got some extracts from that are online that were being developed for it. And I think it was just a case of like, we need to get something, we need to complete something rather than be constantly in process of developing something. So it was Tim that suggested, why don't we have a look at They're Made Out of Meat, which is the piece by Terry Bisson. And so we took that, and rather than doing a sort of, lots of the versions are kind of tone poems, or they're kind of visual, you know, they're kind of just visually lengthened episodes rather than actually being broken down into a short film. So that's what we did. We developed it into a screenplay and then just did it as a short film. And it was purely for fun, actually, I think, and just to kind of start to experiment around with that. We've done some other film work, probably more sort of either more commercial or corporate based bits and pieces here and there. But in terms of narrative based, this was the first little narrative film we did. And it was great fun. And it was kind of really warmly received. It sort of trotted off around the globe whilst we sat here watching it disappear off to places in the States and things like that. I mean, as it happened, Tim and Phil sort of stalked it and followed after it, and that kind of set us up for thinking, okay, well, let's develop another piece, and that's where Flies came from, which again started out. It was in fact the first play we did, wasn't it? So we went back to the original play that we'd done, and we took that from being a kind of one-act play and developed that into a short film. Yeah. And now we've just lost the plot because we were going to do another short film, and it's turned into an hour and a half full.
Well, that was going to be a play. That was going to be a play.
That was also going to be a play. So I think, I think you can tell. I think you can tell by our film work that it's really quite theatrically rooted. You know, personally, I think I've been on a big sort of directorial cinematographic journey in understanding film as a medium as opposed to theatre as a medium, and I've loved it. It's fascinating, but even so, I think you can still see a kind of theatricality about all of the film stuff that we're making and developing.
It seems, question for Tim, it seems with every project you're doing, you're pushing yourselves editorially and visually, especially with the leap from Made Out of Meat to Flies. You could see how the filmmaking was progressing. Is that what you see as well? Are you trying to push?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the challenge with Flies from what it was is you're dealing with a one-man monologue, and how you augment that without being literal with your imagery You know, you don't want to be showing and saying the same things. You want to be augmenting it, and it is very close up. And I think if we hadn't had the experience of creating it as a live piece, the work that was done on that, it could have been a very different piece. And just to go back to They're Made Out of Meat, for instance, there's a few versions knocking around, because I mean the guy gave the text away for people to pretty much do what they will with it. And I'm very proud of that bit and the way that the film was realised. I think it's one of the, you know, I actually think it's the best version, the best film iteration of it, because we're not just stuck on the dialogue. It tells a story, it gives a setting and a sense of the alienation, the body unself-consciousness, and the bizarre interactions with their specimens, if you like, which doesn't come into the dialogue itself. Yeah, I was really proud of that. I thought it was a really tidy bit of work, and Flies was a real vindication of our personal tone, if you like. A real vindication, and when that was getting received so well, that was the sort of feedback we were getting for it, like from people like, look, these guys, was such that we were getting that as we were starting to work on Last Orders, and so I think we all felt quite uninhibited by this thing of like, is it just us who are going to get it? You know, and so I think it's given us a real artistic freedom.
Because you're attached to the source material so much. You're like, especially with the play, it's like, how do you bring that to screen? But you bring it, especially when I've just watched this afternoon the bits from your stage show, which was I'm trying to think.
No, the midlife.
Midlife.
Yeah, that's like a mood board, if you like.
It was very moody, but it had those elements that had sort of a Monty Python kind of twist in it for me. So it's that, because they're very serious subjects you deal with, but there's this sly sense of dark humour that's always in the background with certainly of films.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I think we all have different likes and dislikes and so forth, but I think the theatre of the absurd is something that is quite close to our hearts in some way. Would you say the other two?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, an absurdity is like the great dramatic form of our age. It's after the Second World War. It was a reaction to the absolute appalling circumstances that took place all over the world. I mean, if Shakespeare was for one age, then, you know, Beckett is certainly for the 20th century and beyond, because it's how do you rationalize these kind of, as you say, these incredibly potentially dark circumstances that we are fascinated in exploring, but at the same time give it a tone. I mean, how do you deal with the situations, well, like the situation in lockdown now? I mean, this is an absurd situation, us talking to these little windows.
We would never have done this other than, you know, we would have met up in a studio with a camera with some sound, but now
and now we're making the best of the circumstances, and there's something humorous and tragic at the same time, and it's very, very conditional to what we are as humans, is that we make the best of or get used to the circumstances that we have, and that kind of landscape is a really interesting landscape to create within or to be inspired about. So those are the kind of circumstances that I mean, even in Flies, there is I mean, it's not a humorous piece, but I mean, there is a sense of absurdity within that, in the portrayal of this man just trying to exist within, you know, his abandoned house. So, yeah.
So I'll get onto sound design in a minute, because that's something that's amazing with your films, how that's put together. how do you all work together? Who's the director? Are you all directors, or are you?
No, I am.
Is it one of those situations like when we started? You all say, "Yeah, but I'm the director."
No, I'm the director.
Oh, you are.
I'm the director, and I do the bulk of like the cinematography. But I think what tends to happen is it's somewhere between a sort of a kind of like free for all democratic discussion prior in the development of the whole thing, somewhere between that and a fist fight sometimes in terms of how we develop the work and then I think what happens is then we end up all fighting our corners to kind of go, right, well, this is my stamp, and this is what I'm doing with it, and this is what I'm doing with it, and this is what I'm doing with it. And so there's a kind of actually quite positive tension sometimes. You know, we do kind of get our knickers in a twist sometimes with one another and say, well, hang on a minute, no, this is da-da-da-da. But ultimately it kind of adds to the mix. And it leads to something quite rich, I think, in the process. I mean, originally we kind of came into this being quite defined. I mean, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, but I think originally it was sort of, I said, well, I'll direct. That's my background anyway. I was a theatre director. So I sort of said, well, I'll direct because I'm interested in directing film. I don't know much about it. I'll try and learn as I go along. Tim was kind of going, well, I want to do acting. And Phil was going, well, I want to write. And then it just kind of, so there's a kind of, those roles are there somewhere, set down if you want in the company documents, but ultimately it all gets a little bit blurred. And, but there's something really, I mean, I'm thinking as I'm talking about the present work, and I know we haven't spoken about Last Orders yet, but the whole process by which the film that we're working on at the moment, Last Orders, was developed was in completely arse around. It was completely not the way you would do it if we were a proper kind of production crew team developing a film. You know, you just wouldn't do it the way we did. And I know that Tim probably has like minor conniptions over the sheer kind of fumble about sometimes, but maybe some of the others can say a bit more, because I don't want to popular, Last Orders yet. I don't know whether we're even talking about that.
Yeah, no, but we can talk about. I was just going to bring to Tim to say sound is very important to you. Do you do the sound for the films?
We do. On the first two we released, we involved composers, and also, but I kind of, what typically happens is we'll get the stuff shot. Jason will do an assemble edit of how it all needs to be, and then I'll go through and work the final cut and do any digital effects that are needed and put things in. And generally, in the editing process, there's quite a lot of percolation going on. And as Jason was saying, we're pretty rigorous with each other all the way through the process.
Haven't any of you got something to say? Closure. And we sit and we wait, and she crosses her legs, her eyes dart open her face. She's looking for something. In those moments, fingering the blister packs as the flies pester half-eaten food. In these moments, I think I could leave.
So you're serious? They're made out of meat.
Thank you. Finally. Yes, they are indeed made out of meat. and they've been trying to contact us for nearly 100 of their years.
So what does this meet have in mind?
You know, we're all concerned to, you know, get it really good as we can and be very clear about what we do. Sometimes we get the opportunity to shoot at short notice and possibly haven't done as much preparation as we should have. And often, you know, there was one scene we shot, it's probably October or November, and I just wasn't clear about the tone of this three-word line right at the beginning. And it's literally, so what's he saying? Is he saying, is he saying, is it, and a very fruitful 5-minute workshop on 3 short 1-syllable words. But that's kind of typical all the way through. And we have our own areas of expertise, if you like. You know, I've got digital deliveries up the wazoo, you know, and my work in post-production is very much about finished goods and things being as good as they can be. And so, like with the sound design for Flies, for instance, it was trying to match the intensity of the images. In that sense, there's a few which really come up high in the mix, like the sprinkling of the powder pills and when the doctor crosses her legs, and it's getting that sense of, you know, really amplified sensibility and really sort of psychopathic.
It just adds so much to the film and
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, with your acting, because you'll I mean, as I say, the dark sense of humor, you've got great sense of humor in this interview and stuff like that. But you choose these subjects, you're like, I suppose you're bearing, would you say bearing your soul on film? Because it's subjects. I mean,
Flies. Well, I mean, Flies. It's interesting. I wrote the play about 8 or 9 years ago, and then we did it again with Baobab, and I mean, it's about grief, and I mean, I don't really. It's a subject that has been very, very real and present to me. Certainly, over the last 2 or 3 years, I lost my brother, and to brain cancer, and so it was an itch that I just had to scratch, really, in terms of, I mean, the play itself doesn't give a resolution. It doesn't say, you know, in the writing that I put down, it's an open circumstance of a person trying to figure out or get, in the end, to come to some resolution with himself. But it's left kind of open as to whether, as an observer, you think he's resolved anything at the end, in terms of the process that he goes through and the sort of the haunting that he has, and how he tries to make sense of his daily process, those kind of things. So yeah, in terms of the kind of subject matter that we go to, I think we are led to those kind of dark places. But yeah, with dark places, and maybe Flies isn't a great example of that, but with dark places, it's always useful to have a guide who's humorous. You know what I mean? And it's very important to have that kind of range, because if it's too unrelenting and it doesn't have the colour that sort of humour kind of brings in, or another tone, if you like, tonally, just adds in another layer, then things can be difficult. You know, so Flies in particular was something that I think that we all came together and we all had kind of feelings about and got a sense of. And I think that comes across in the sound, in the directing, in the performance that Tim delivers, and in the script that I wrote. So, yeah.
It's shown because your success at the festivals, but you do what, I mean, the films, obviously with the English Riviera Film Festival and the films you've shown there, is you remember them. Because something with emotional core to it, you remember that film. I mean, there's big special effects. You could throw as many special effects as a film as possible. But your films have got an emotional core, and obviously very looking forward to what you do with the feature. So we've got sort of five minutes left now. If you could tell us a bit about the feature, what you want to tell us, and where we can follow your journey. So whoever wants to answer that one.
Well, it started as a like a theatre project, and it was one of these questions was like, what do you want to do? I said, oh, I want to do King Lear. And Phil went, oh, actually, I've been thinking about a certain verse, you know, the dynamic between Lear and the form. And so it started. That was actually the seeds of what turned into this story about a guy's relationship with power, and then moving into a space where his power is irrelevant, and the absurdity, you know, it's Phil, Jason.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I mean, it's building on King Lear. It has elements of Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. It's two characters in a landscape looking for meaning, looking for circumstance. And as I wrote it set in a post-apocalyptic situation where a virus has taken out the world, or certainly the location that they are in, Britain. And I started writing it on holiday in France in 2018. So it's quite spooky when we look at some of the footage and some of the, I mean, we've been doing some sort of promotional material on Facebook, and one of the ones is with either Jason or Tim wearing a gas mask and a fake sort of BBC strapline saying, you know, are you safe? Are you secure? You know, and it just seems spooky that oh my God, where's he gone?
That's the magic
it's
of
magic.
cinema.
Look, it looks like smoke. But so basically, it's working off the absurdism. It's working with dark themes, and it is the expansion of an idea around sort of theatrical artifice and character and devices, and then playing that out using film. And the reason it expanded, because it was going to be a short film, I think it was fair to say, but I think it was Jason and Tim and we're sort of discussing how that sort of expands so that we gave it breadth. And we're shooting it, really pleased to be shooting it on Dartmoor primarily, a fantastic location. And you know, as they often say, location could be another character. I mean, this is definitely the case with Dartmoor. I mean, it's an unforgiving environment. We've been in some very, very dark places. I mean, I don't mean literally, but just standing where a lens has been knackered and the rain is just bashing down. And
we've had a few sort of apocalypse now moments, haven't we? Trying to film it, it has been. There's been moments of grim, absolute grim. In which tempers have been frayed.
Oh God, yeah.
But
So if you want to find out about the kind of stuff that we're doing and where it is, obviously you can go to our website, which is www.baobabtheatre.org. And we're also on Facebook. Now, Flies is still continuing its travels. At the moment, it's on YouTube.
Oh, brilliant.
Oh, yeah, that's the image that we put out. With a gas mask and... which was weird. But so Flies is available on YouTube at the moment, but it is limited on YouTube. So we're pushing it out, just advertising it on Facebook again, actually, today after this, because very soon we've come to an arrangement with the company. Yeah. Tim can tell you a little bit more about this.
Basically, I'm just in the process over the next few days of QCing the deliverables for an Amazon release, just doing the subtitles and whatnot. And there's a chap, Taz runs a company called myprodction.com, and he's got connections with worldwide VODs, and they act as a kind of distributor to VODs worldwide. We'll be popping that up hopefully in the next week or so. I've just got to get all the deliverables together, and that'll be available on Amazon. And I'll be doing the same with They're Made Out of Meat also. Yeah. So that's going to be happening.
So depending on when this goes out, you might have already missed a chance to see Flies in its full form on YouTube. But I mean, if
Oh, we can keep it on YouTube. It's a non-exclusive deal. Question of accessing many platforms. So yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thanks very much for joining today. I could talk forever with you guys.
Oh, we can talk.
Yeah.
It's getting us to shut up is the problem.
I'll tell you what, John. I don't know. I mean, something we omitted to say at the beginning was one of the reasons for making They're Made Out of Meat was people were aware we were active doing something and wondered what we were doing. We thought, well, we need to show people in the area what we're doing, and it was seeing the English Riviera Film Festival pop
that's
up.
right.
Which was like, oh, that would probably be a good place for people locally to go, yeah, we've done that, you know, and that was pretty much. So if it weren't for the English Riviera Film Festival, we may well not have even made They Made Out of Meat. So thank you, John.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you
absolutely.
well, thank you very much to the team and people that at the festival.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, awesome, brilliant. Thanks very much.